Okay. There we go. So we should be recording at this point. So, quick overview of what we are going to do today. I'll give a really brief overview of the budget development process. Most of you, I think, have seen this slide, a couple of these slides, and have heard this information, but it's a little bit of a refresher. And also, we have some new guidance that we have received on this, so we'll also be sharing that with you all as well. And we'll spend a majority of our conversation today talking about potential budget issues and discussing those. And so that will primarily follow the attachment that was sent out and posted on our website of potential budget issues that the department is considering. So that's both was emailed out, it's posted on our website, and it's also attached in the meeting invite. So there are 3 different places that you'll be able to find that if you are looking for it. Okay, so we are going to get going. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone. So, okay, now I've got a couple screens to monitor. Can everyone see my screen? Perfect. Okay, seeing head nods. I'm going to open up the chat. I will do my best to monitor the chat as well as move the slides and facilitate our conversation. As a reminder, hand raise function is the best way for me to see that you have something that you'd like to contribute. Chat's also a great place, but raising your hand's a much easier way for me to call on you. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So this is a brief reminder. All of you have theoretically seen this slide before, and this is just a quick reminder of the budget process. So the budget typically takes 3 different iterations. First is the agency request budget, second is the governor's recommended budget, and third is the legislatively adopted budget. So the ARB is typically developed early 2024, submitted and published in August, and we are currently working with the governor's office right now to work on POPs for the agency ARB. If there is someone that is not on mute, could you please mute yourself? I don't necessarily, I'm looking at the chat really quick right now. Looks like there's a couple folks that are unmuted, so if you could mute yourself, that would be fantastic. All right, thank you for that. So we are currently working with the governor's office right now on policy option packages or new investments for the agency ARB. And that typically, once we have the ARB submitted and finalized, that typically serves as options for the governor to consider in her governor's recommended budget. So the GRB is typically published in December and often pulls from the agency ARB as well as the governor's priorities. And it also considers things like revenue projections and a balanced budget. So that's how the agency request budget funnels into the governor's recommended budget. And then from there, the governor's recommended budget is the starting point for agency negotiations during the long legislative session. So legislative committees will review the GRB, they'll hold public meetings, and then the legislature determines and votes on the budget. So the budget can be made up of portions of the governor's recommended budget, legislation that's passed during the session that has fiscal impacts that would add positions or add resources to the department, as well as interim, emergency, board, and special sessions can also impact the agency's budget as well. Raquel, go ahead.
I just want to do a quick audio check for folks. Not that I can see very many folks on video right now. Can folks understand Bryn? Bryn, I think your microphone was a little scratchy when we first started. It seems to have gotten better, but it's not necessarily the best. How's that? So I'm finding I'm having to focus a little bit more just because there's a little bit more noise. So
Raquel, I just plugged headphones in. Is that better?
Oh my gosh, I can hear you. That's so much better.
Well,
sorry, Bryn.
Shoot, there goes my strategy of making everyone lean in and listen.
I don't think we would be leaning in. It was a little more
leaning
creative.
away, maybe.
Okay,
great.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the heads up. I had a message from someone internally, and I assume it was that. So I appreciate you calling that out, Raquel. All right. Well, good thing you've all already seen this slide, so there's not much to, you should have already seen this. So we'll move on. I'm glad everyone can hear me now. You've all also seen this slide. This is really kind of the general considerations that the agency asked our staff to think about when we were crafting potential ideas for budget issues for the 25-27 agency request budget. So I'm not going to go through all of these. You've all have seen this, but I do want to highlight one of the specific considerations for our policy option packages. And as we were thinking about investments, really what we were trying to funnel folks into thinking about most was filling resource gaps that sustain progress on existing work or benefit the development of strong programmatic foundations. So really working on filling gaps and ensuring that our foundation as an agency is shored up. So before we jump into our discussion on potential budget packages and budget investments, there is some feedback, or excuse me, some guidance that we actually received yesterday from the Department of Administrative Services as well as the governor's office that will be helpful for helpful context for our discussion today, and will ultimately provide some really helpful context for our ask to all of you in terms of feedback. So revenue forecast came out a few weeks ago, and while the revenue forecast is projecting an increase in available revenues over the current biennium, the projected growth is likely only enough to cover the increased costs for current programs. And so what that really means for the agency request budget is we've been informed that there will not be resources to make significant program expansions or capacity to establish new programs in the next biennium. And so we have been directed that for programs relying on general fund, so general fund is the key word, for general fund supported programs, agencies will be given a limit for policy option package development of 1% or up to 2% increase from the legislatively approved budgets in 23-25. And that cap will be based on agency size. So we don't yet know what our cap is going to be. It'll be anywhere from 1% to 2%, or it could be up to 2% based on agency size. But given that we're kind of a smaller agency, we'll adjust once we know what our cap is actually going to be. But what this really means is we have to refine and prioritize our budget requests to fit within that provided cap. So that's really limiting. As you can see, we have quite a big list in front of you today, and 1% or up to 2% really isn't a whole lot. And so what we need to do is be really strategic about what we put forward. And part of our discussion today with all of you will be to really evaluate what priorities you all have and where you think we should be spending our time, provided that there is a limited revenue forecast and a desire to limit new programs. With that being said, as the agency, we have kind of taken that guidance and have really tried to shift our focus for POPs for 25-27 on improving customer service efficiency and delivery of existing programs. And so we have this big list. We know we need to narrow it down, and we really do want to focus on those things: customer service, efficiency, and delivery of existing programs. So in terms of deadlines and what this means, the next deadline for budget development is April 30th, which is when legislative concepts and POPs are due, policy option packages. From there, the governor's office will review and work with us through May into June to finalize POPs, finalize legislative concepts that are due into the budget system at the end of July. So as we turn our attention towards discussing and gathering feedback on potential investment opportunities with all of you, which are included in the budget issues attachment that you should all have, we need to do some significant narrowing. So again, that 1% to 2% cap is going to significantly limit what we are able to even put in the ARP. And so we'll end our conversation with a specific ask for feedback. But when we work through all of these items, I really want folks to keep in mind the aforementioned focused areas of improving customer service, efficiencies, and delivery of existing programs. And consider which items are highest priority to you. So this will be really helpful feedback for us as we consider what items to request, what you all think is important to us, and we want to be able to consider that as we are doing our narrowing. So I am going to pull up the budget issues sheet that you all have, but before that, I want to see if there are any questions or comments before I jump in. Raquel, go ahead.
Bryn, I'm going to apologize if I missed you saying this. So 1%, just so folks know, for us is about $880,000. Did you say that, Bryn?
No, I did not.
Oh,
but that's
okay.
a very helpful point. Thank you, Raquel.
So, and I just see all these things on the screen now. So I just want to note that for folks, we don't know if we're in the 1% or the 2% bucket, essentially, but if it's 1%, it's about $880,000. So as you go through this process, while there's not numbers associated with these POPs, it does mean that in terms of providing us with feedback, we're going to be looking for quite a narrowing on these POPs. For reference, if we need a position associated with some proposal, positions are generally depending on the level, anywhere between 150K to 250K. Remember, that is not annual, that is for 2 years. We get that question quite a bit. That 880,000 is for 2 years, right? So just a couple things to keep in mind as we go through this process is that there's going to need to be a significant narrowing here. We'll also be working closely with the governor's office on what actually gets submitted as well. So there's a number of inputs, your feedback, as well as certainly the work that we'll be doing with our staff and with our executive team as we go forward. Lisa, did I miss anything on that or mischaracterize anything, knowing that I'm not the budget guru for us?
Nope, I think you hit on everything just right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Raquel. So it looks like we got a question from Mike. So Mike, go ahead. And then Kaylin, I might ask you to clarify your question because I'm not sure I'm tracking what your question is. So if you could go after Mike, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, hi, Bryn. Just a quick question about the last bullet here. Could you elaborate a little bit on the build greater landscape resiliency? Is that just resiliency in general, or I'm just getting hung up on that landscape word? Could you just elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yep, Mike, I've not gotten to that yet, so I will. Great segue though, thank you. Kaylin, is that what your question is too?
Sorry, guys, struggling with the mute button. Yes, my question was related to that last bullet and wasn't one of the two that you mentioned in terms of the prioritization. So good segue.
Yep. Perfect. And I want to also address the question in the comments that if staff COLAs have come out of the 800K, what might that look like? So the COLAs, the cost of living increases are covered by general fund salary pot dollars. So that is money that comes from the general fund every year, and agencies get a slice of that pie. So Lisa, please chime in. But my understanding is for general funded positions, the COLAs are not part of that $800,000 cap that we are getting. That's part of, that's going to be covered elsewhere. Is that correct, Lisa?
That's correct. For purposes of this exercise, we are being told that we can consider our current service level, which is basically programs as they are today, carried into next full for purposes of this exercise, and that COLA for general fund is included in our current service, or will be included in our current service level come our budget, sorry, not current service level, come next February, not the February after the budget starts. That's usually a February of even years exercise or funding exercise.
So Lisa, you cut out for a second there. I think to recap, folks, the 880K is what we can ask for in POPs. So the rest, when we're talking about COLAs for general fund, it is built into our budget through some mechanism, either through us doing the current service levels or through the salary pot COLA process. So we'll set those aside for the purposes of this conversation, is I guess the key takeaways. Is that correct? Lisa, did I summarize correctly?
Yeah, that's not part of current service level. I misspoke. It's actually part of the February of even years. So after our budget has been approved, it's part of the salary pot in February of even years.
Got it.
Great. Thanks. Great question, though. Okay, so transitioning. So this PowerPoint, as well as the way that the document that has all of our budget options are, it's a little out of date, provided that the guidance that we received was yesterday and there wasn't time to shift. But this is really predicated on the exercise that we did with our commission several weeks ago, which we were directed to essentially bucket each of our proposed budget issues into 3 different categories. So the first was POPs that were critical to agency operations and customer service. The second was POPs that support and enhance execution of existing programs. And then the third was POPs that address the critical need to build greater landscape resiliency, really focused on making sure that wherever our nexus is as an agency to landscape resiliency, so think things like natural disasters, natural hazards, climate change, things like that, POPs that focus on filling gaps there and giving capacity there. Provided this new guidance, this is not to say that the items within this bucket are not important or that we will not be moving forward. We may just be looking at those items a bit differently given the new feedback that we have received and guidance that we have received from the governor's office, that items within that bucket may not fit into the customer service efficiency improvements and delivery of existing programs. That may impact POPs both in that bucket and also throughout all of these buckets. So that's just to say this categorization of POPs is a little outdated based on the new guidance we've received, but I think it doesn't impact our conversation for the purposes of today all that much. So what we are going to do is with the sheet that we have provided you all that has all of the budget items, we are going to go through that sheet bucket by bucket. So we're going to start off with the agency operations and customer service bucket. We're going to go through each of those items. I'll give a really high level overview. I would really appreciate if we could just kind of get through the whole bucket and then we'll open the floor for discussion just to ensure that we can have a little bit of a smoother conversation. Feel free to drop stuff in the chat, raise your hand for any questions, but we'll go through bucket by bucket and then we'll open the floor for questions, comments, highlighting which items you think are important, maybe highlighting items you don't think are important. You know, that feedback's always helpful as well. So that's kind of how we're going to do it, is we're going to go through bucket by bucket and then we'll pause after each. Go ahead, Raquel.
So Bryn, I just want to do a check on how you're planning to obtain feedback. So I know in the meeting materials, you've provided folks with a feedback sheet that they can fill out. Yep. I'm hoping it's not PDF now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, perfect.
It's not. Yep.
And so folks could certainly provide their comments on that sheet as you go through it and then email it to you. Yep. This isn't the only forum for providing feedback. I think the sheets will allow us to document that feedback a bit easier. So are you looking for feedback today? Or are you looking to help folks understand the POPs today and then asking that they provide the feedback on the written sheet?
Yeah, thanks, Raquel. So we will finish up with how you can provide more feedback. I think I'm open to collecting feedback today and also in writing. I think if there are clarifying questions that folks might have, that will also be really important that folks ask those today. But if there are items that people think are important that they want to flag, I think it's okay for folks to vocalize that in this meeting as well. But yes, we will get to how we fill out the handout because timelines have shifted a bit. And so I didn't want to, we'll cover that once we've gotten through all of these different pops. Okay. So here is the PDF version, just a little easier for everyone to read. You all should have a Word version for your feedback sheet, but I'm going to use the PDF version. Can everyone see that on my screen? Perfect. Okay, so we are going to start at the top with policy option packages that are critical to agency operations and customer service. So this is our largest bucket of items, and so I will be talking at you a bit for this bucket. The other ones are much shorter, I promise. So I'll just go ahead and work on the first page for this. So the first two items are items that we have talked about both at the last meeting as well as in other venues, but these are our budget shortfalls related to our well construction fees as well as our water right transactions and dam safety fee shortfalls. So staff in both the well construction, dam safety, and water right transactions program are either partially or fully supported by fees depending on the program. Each of these programs are core to our mission and responsibility for maintaining public health and safety and managing Oregon's water resources. We are facing revenue shortfalls in each of those programs with the fees associated with those programs. And so we are working in a smaller group at this point in time to kind of work through what these shortfalls means and what potential solutions there might be to address these shortfalls. In addition, there is additional policy work going on both internally and externally on streamlining and improving water right transaction processes. So there are some accompanying LCs or legislative concepts that are associated with those two pops, essentially. The next item is another budget shortfall. This one is related to House Bill 3315, which was passed back in 2015. This bill essentially required the Department of Fish and Wildlife to recuperate costs incurred by providing services to other executive branch agencies. For WRD, what this means specifically is we pay ODFW for work on their evaluation of some water right applications. And so we require their review for fish and wildlife impacts, and then we also reimburse them for that service. We have historically in the past not been provided funding to pay for these expenses and have been began to incur those costs in the last biennium. Those payments started beginning in 2019 and had to be paid in the last biennium. And so this is a shortfall within our budget that needs to be addressed. The next item is a fee shortfall reduction package. And so this is essentially what we have to submit if we are unable to address the shortfalls that I spoke about in the well construction program and the water right transactions and dam safety program fee shortfalls. So in order to keep a balanced budget, we have to ensure that the number of folks we have on the books and the money that we are spending on either resources, so contracting dollars, facilitation dollars, technical assistance dollars, and staff. So essentially our budget needs to be balanced. And if we have shortfall, that means we have to reduce funding somewhere else to make sure that our budget is balanced. And so that's what this package is that if we are unable to address the shortfalls in our fee supported programs, this is a reduction package to essentially make up for that shortfall within our budget. Next item is state scenic waterways budget shortfall. You can see a theme here. So the Department of Parks and Recreation currently provides WRD, our agency, with funding to support scenic waterway work. Over the last biennia, the inflationary costs have increased to the point where they have not been able to keep up with the actual cost of state employee personal services for our 6 positions that do state scenic waterway work. And so this policy option package would essentially be resources to plug that gap for those staff. Next item is related to internal auditing. So we are required to maintain an internal audit function per ORSs as well as administrative rules. We have not historically had the resources or been given the resources to have this person on staff to do this internal audit work. And so we have obtained a waiver over the last several years while we have attempted to try to get resources and have been unsuccessful. So this is a package that would provide us with an internal audit function. We have also discovered that OWEB, the Watershed Enhancement Board, also needs an internal audit function and does not have one. And so we are pursuing opportunities to potentially share a position across agencies for something like this. So that's what that POP is. Next one is our information technology package, which is really focused on strategic information technology. So we have an IT strategic plan that really looks at how we can advance our agency's IT program from being reactive to being more proactive. Having a fully mature IT program is critical as we modernize and continue to provide data and services to both our staff internally as well as external folks who interact with our programs. And so this includes modernization of internal and external facing databases, getting more staff on board to be more strategic in terms of how we plan for IT projects and implement IT projects. So this one is quite a large package that really focuses on modernizing our IT program. Next package is environmental justice and equity work for communications, as well as delivering and providing better access to information for Oregon's communities. So we've been working our best to integrate best practices across programs and advanced diversity, equity, inclusion, and environmental justice work throughout the agency. And we're also looking to better support our DEI team and provide resources to advance their work and also implement enterprise-wide DEIJ objectives. And so with that recognition, we understand that there needs to be culturally appropriate and accessible materials as we try to engage with folks. So that means using appropriate languages, formats, accessibility requirements to ensure that our communication and our interaction with folks all across Oregon is effective, appropriate, and impactful. One more page, and then I'll stop talking at you for a bit, I promise. Next item within this bucket is human resources and workplace safety needs. So long story short, workload and responsibilities within our human resources division have significantly increased, provided that we have added nearly 100 new positions over the last few biennia. There's also a variety of new expectations from this new governor's office administration, as well as implementation of new programs such as Paid Leave Oregon. And so we as an agency now consist of over 250 employees, many of which work in the field and throughout the state, not just in Salem. And so this means that there are all different kinds of work sites all across the state, different types of equipment that our staff use, and all of the work to ensure workplace safety and do a lot of this new work that we are being asked to do has fallen on the same staff member. And what this really means is that there hasn't been capacity to work on workplace safety within the agency. And that's really a problem as we are adding new staff, as well as with the growing kind of enterprise-wide increased safety concerns that have been vocalized really across agencies, that workplace safety is something that really needs to be addressed. And so this POP would provide some resources to help address that. Next item is web coordinator. We currently don't have a primary staff person who is dedicated and in charge of maintaining our website. We've received feedback that it's difficult to navigate and the information is not necessarily accessible. I would say that I sometimes agree with folks on that one. So we need a web coordinator in order to make our website a little more effective. Those of you who have done anything with websites know that infrastructure within a website is often really quite integrated, and you really need to know what you're doing before you start pulling strings. So that's what that web coordinator is for. The next item is the structure of the director's office. So WRD is structured with a dual deputy system where we really have kind of strategy administration on one side and then technical field water rights on another side, both managed by the respective deputy director. We also have a structure where each individual division has an administrator. That is true for every division except for the director's office, which includes policy folks, planning, collaboration, investment, think our grant programs, things our planning programs, things like that, which is now the size of a full division. And we have the Deputy Director of Strategy and Administration serving as both the Deputy Director as well as the Division Administrator. And this has created workflow issues, timeliness issues, and being able to be flexible and responsive to needs within the agency. And so, or needs within the division. And so what this POP would essentially do is it would restructure the director's office a little bit to mirror the structure of other divisions within the agency. Next item is a placeholder, but it's in a similar vein and related to staffing, which is the position reclassification. So this is if we need to reclass certain positions, either up or down. We're currently working with the Department of Administrative Services to see where that needs to be done. Next two items are related to legal expenses. The first is for the Klamath adjudication. So the adjudication is ongoing. We are incurring legal expenses from that work. And the adjudication is very important that we continue to support it because it will allow folks in the basin to understand what they have in terms of water rights. And so we need resources to kind of keep moving forward on that. The next item is in the same vein, which is a legal coordinator and costs for legal expenses. So legal issues continue to increase in the face of climate change and water scarcity and require substantial time from executive level managers. And so currently we have some pretty senior level staff that are spending a significant amount of time tracking and coordinating litigation cases and costs. And it's our opinion that that's not a super great use of that person's staff time or those folks' time. And so adding some extra capacity to be able to coordinate and actually have resources to pay for legal costs are also really important to our work. And then the last item within this bucket is water data needs and potential water data portal resources. So we had a similar POP to this during the last legislative session that didn't make it through, but we know we have a significant need to address some QA/QC issues within our data, as well as some data sprawl and data architecture issues within our databases. We know that addressing these problems will make our data more accessible and usable internally as well as externally, and it'll also make our systems more accessible for data sharing efforts, such as the water data portal work that's being queued up by DEQ. So this is a package that would provide resources for that kind of data cleanup and data sharing work. So that was a lot, but I want to pause and see if there are any questions, comments, points of clarification. If anyone wants to step in and say, hey, I think this one POP is really important, that's invited too. But this is the biggest section of our policy option packages. So I want to be sure that we're giving folks adequate time to marinate on those. Brandon.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick question. I don't see any dollar amounts on these POPs. And so if you're asking for feedback, and I mean, ideally to be fiscally responsible, I would want to make sure that my number adds up to 880, right? And so what is the total POP dollar amount that the department is seeking? Or is it possible to find out through a follow-up document what the cost of each of these POPs are, or at least anticipated to be?
Go ahead, Raquel.
So Brandon, we're being fiscally responsible by not going that far down the process.
Sure.
So we do have some of these POPs, we may have some initial estimates, but really it's a lot of work to go through and price pops. So my ask to folks would be, what are your top 5, right? That's really what it's going to come down to, I think, in terms of providing us with the best feedback. And that'll help us understand, I think, the issues better in terms of what's important to all of you. But given that the budget process, this go around is that we're working to improve it, and there's been some uncertainty at this point. And I'm honestly glad we didn't, because there's, Bryn, how many pops are here? There's 30 something,
Yeah,
20 something,
27, I think.
so there's 20 something pops. Going through and pricing all of those would be a significant amount of time. And the reality is we're probably only going to be able to submit 5, if I'm doing a rough 5 tops, right? One of these pops could take up all 880K, depending on which ones which one it is. So I think that from my standpoint, Brandon, I hear you. And it's also not probably the best use of our resources right now to try to go and have our fiscal staff price all of these things out. Is that helpful?
Yeah, no, it is. I appreciate it. I just want to be sure to give you all the best feedback that I can. And so trying to keep it under a certain dollar amount. But if you're just looking for, top 4 or 5, regardless of what all they pencil out to, right? That's whatever we can do to be helpful. So,
well, and I think there's 2 ways to go about it. You can say, here's my top 5, right? You can also say, knowing that, some of these, well, this whole bucket here is in part focused on our gaps. We've got a lot of gaps, as you're seeing. And what that means is that as a management group, we're going to be trying to figure out what's going to move the needle for us the most, and obviously weighing the costs. So you can certainly, on the worksheet, there's, if I'm remembering it correctly, Bryn, you can put comments in there, right? So you might say, all of these seem important. Do what, is going to move the needle the most on X, Y, and Z. You can also provide us with that kind of feedback of, like, what are your principles that you think we should be thinking about as we go through this process? Knowing that 5 is going to be difficult for us to get down to anyways. So there's different ways you can go about it. But if you're thinking about it from like what realistically are we going to be able to fund? It's probably going to be 5 or less pops.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, points of clarification on this bucket before we move to the other one, next 2? Great. Okay. Next bucket, a lot shorter. See, I promised. This is the bucket on investments that support and enhance execution of existing program authority. So there are 3 items in this bucket. The first is one that you have all heard about. This is a companion policy option package for the Harney Conservation Reserve Enhancement Fund. And this is the companion policy option package to the concept that essentially allows for the existing general fund appropriation that we have within our base budget for the Harney Conservation Reserve Enhancement Fund to move from a general fund appropriation at the end of the biennium and roll over into an other funds appropriation. So this is really a technical budget fix, and it has to do with an existing base budget appropriation. But this is the companion pop to the legislation should that legislation move forward. The next item is a restoration of funds item, which is funding for groundwater studies and water budgets. So back in 2023, 2025, our budget actually was reduced to the tune of about $450,000 from our groundwater investigations and observation well budget. And so this is funding that really supports cooperative groundwater basin studies, groundwater data collection, drilling and maintenance of observation wells that help us better understand groundwater levels across the state. And so we've contracted with the U.S. Geological Survey for a lot of this work, specifically statewide groundwater recharge and water budgets, of which the first phase of that work will be completed early to mid 2026, roughly. And so in order for us to effectively engage with communities around these data and to help them understand what all of these data mean, we really need the resources to help support effective outreach and community engagement. So this is resources that we had previously had. It was reduced when we had budget cuts. And this is a proposal to essentially restore that funding. The third item is related to our protest backlog reduction efforts. So we received general fund appropriations in 2023 to work on our water rights protest backlog. And we actually got a record number of protests resolved. But unfortunately, there was also an instance where we received a wave of new protests, which actually increased the backlog, unfortunately. We were able to use some American Rescue Plan Act, so federal dollars, to continue this work through a portion of this biennium, but at a much lower level. And basically what has happened is those resources, those extra resources to work on backlog reduction efforts have been spent. And so the protest program is down to one staffer right now to work on protests and protest work with DOJ and the Office of Administrative Hearings. And so this would be a proposal to increase resources to continue to work on the protest backlog reduction work. This is all for this bucket. Before we go to the third, any questions, comments, points of clarifications here? All right, not seeing any hands, not seeing anything in the chat. All right, next bucket. And this is the bucket that is addressing critical needs to build greater landscape resiliency. So this one, I think there were several questions around what this bucket actually means in the context of the guidance to really focus on existing programs. As you can see, there are existing programs on here and there are some new proposals on here. And so when I said that, that feedback kind of runs throughout all of the different buckets, this is kind of what I'm talking about. So there are 5 items here. The first is a POP that some of you may have seen over the last several iterations of agency request budgets on levy inventory and assessments. So currently there is not a full inventory for levies that are not regulated by the federal government. And we have many levies in the state of Oregon that are not regulated by the feds. And these levies jeopardize public safety should they fail. And so we currently don't have the resources to do an inventory, to inspect, classify, and assign hazard ratings to these levies. But that work we acknowledge would be very important and impactful for Oregon's communities that are impacted by this issue. And so this would be resources to actually go ahead and do that work. The next item is interagency LUGWAMA work. So groundwater contamination issues are severely impacting communities in the lower Umatilla Basin groundwater management area. And so there is an interagency effort going on between several natural resource agencies and public health agencies to address the issues that are arising. However, we need more funding at WRD to engage further and get additional capacity for whatever might be needed for that work. That could be project coordination and management, technical assistance, field work, whatever is needed, data collection, things like that to address those issues. We are working with other agencies to kind of evaluate what that might look like so we can leverage our efforts together and be sure that we're aligned. The next item is one that folks are likely familiar to seeing, which is the recapitalization of funding for our existing grant programs. So this includes our Water Project Grants and Loans Fund, which is the fund that exists to implement water solutions for water projects for public benefits, feasibility study grants, which investigate project feasibility prior to actually investing in a project, as well as our newly established funding for our place-based planning program, which was established permanently back in the 2023 legislative session. And then the last item is the Water Well Abandonment Repair and Replacement Fund, which provides resources in the form of grant dollars to homes that are experiencing groundwater level issues. And so that's funding to re-put resources in that fund so that folks can access it. Next item is an item that folks who were engaged in our last budget would be familiar with. These are resources for the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation water rights settlement facilitation. So we received resources to facilitate that settlement and other water issues back in the 2023 biennium. That was one-time funding. And it's expected that this work will take longer than through this biennium, and we anticipate that it'll bleed into the next biennia. And so this would be funding to recapitalize those resources to carry that work forward into the next biennium. And then the last item here is aquifer recharge and aquifer storage and recovery capacity. And so storage can be a critical component for adapting to water scarcity. And we acknowledge that our AR and ASR program is an effective tool that can help folks in some cases achieve those storage goals. And so this right here, this item is a proposal that would provide more resources and capacity for us to more effectively facilitate the use of AR and ASR and ensure more timely processing of applications and improve customer service there. So that is all I've got for that item. And are there any questions, comments? Kimberly.
Yeah, I guess I was hoping for a little more clarity on the AR, ASR. As I recall, at least the 839 fund and probably some of the others do allow for funding of AR and ASR. So I guess I'm curious. I guess I'd just like a little more detail on what this entails. I mean, is it having a staffer at ODF&W, at their WRD to help people through the process, or is it money for the projects? Because again, I think they can already get the money.
Yep, Kimberly, you are correct. So this was from a previous POP from the last go around, which included one staffer within the ASR AR program. So basically staff capacity to actually provide better customer service, help folks understand what's entailed of the program. This is not dollars for projects, it's staff capacity to provide better customer service and help people along and better understand and better utilize the actual tool in the program. JR.
Sorry, I'm not good with Teams. Don't know where the button is. So maybe we'll get into the comments on that, but there's actually two areas, and I think AR and ASR is a great discussion point, just like you're dealing with the ODF&W funding. But in our experience with AR and ASR, it's gotten exceedingly more difficult to work with the current department staff because of the amount of interagency coordination you are having to coordinate with DEQ and OHA and federal entities that you're having comment on models that are put together for your recharge. Are there any discussions going on with these other agencies about consolidating the process? Because using our basin as an example, we have multiple recharge and groundwater models that we almost have to reinvent the wheel every single test and do more modeling, et cetera, because some agency asked you to do it, which is a significant burden on the agency. And I think a significant cost savings for the other agencies that are kind of using you to get more information. So is there any discussions about how we can make this more efficient, not just add staff to give you a phone call to tell you it's going to take 2 more years to get your limited license through, but something that truly makes AR and ASR testing a more efficient and a more data compounding exercise than starting over every single time you try to test something.
Yeah, great question, JR. I don't know if, oh, Raquel's coming on. She might know the answer to that. I was going to punt it. Go ahead, Raquel.
No, I'm going to do the same thing. JR, Bryn, I hope you took that note down.
Yep.
Let's do some follow-up on it with our groundwater staff. I do see your cat.
I'm
coming
sorry.
through. Okay. I'm
still listening, I promise.
Such a cat moment there, folks.
I know.
I do see Annette is on today, but I don't expect that Annette actually knows the answer to that question. So Annette's the TSD administrator, Technical Services Division, for those of you that don't know our acronyms, which she oversees the groundwater section. So JR, she heard your comments as well. Annette, do you have anything to add to that or comments?
I was just actually typing it in the chat. So thank you for that suggestion, JR. We at this point don't have any plans to do some further integration and streamlining, but I appreciate the suggestion, and I will talk with the groundwater section manager and staff and assess what opportunities might exist there. So thank you.
Looks like we have a question in the chat related to the levy concept, as to whether OEM would be a good entity. I don't know. That's an interesting thought, though. I think we should definitely consider, maybe phoning our friends, but I anticipate that OEM has similar budget constraints as we do. So this may be one of these ones that has to be punted to another biennium.
So Bryn, this is Annette. I can speak to that a little bit. We have coordinated closely with the Department of Geology and Mineral Industries and Department of Land Conservation and Development on levy assessments, because there's interest both on the hazard mitigation side for those agencies. Those would be the partners that we would work most closely with. And in addition, we've also chatted with Business Oregon, since they do have a funding program that helps with levee repairs. But right now, I think the biggest need is that nobody has an actual inventory of all of the levees in Oregon. And so that would be the first step.
Annette, we should do, and maybe you already talked with Business Oregon about it, when that levy fund was set up years ago, we had worked with Business Oregon to allow, I believe it's the interest, can be utilized to fund a staff person at our agency. We'd have to go back and look at the legislation, but there may be an opportunity there. The staff have since turned over. Oh, Mark is saying no. Maybe Mark remembers this, but I know there was some discussion about, I'd have to go back and look at that bill. It's been a while. But I know when we'd reached out a little while back, there was not, I don't think there was a opportunity for us to do that. So I don't know if we've since checked in on that. Mark, do you have something to add to my vague memory here?
Well, I helped put together the funding for that program. It's under the Special Public Works Fund that's run by OBDD. We created a sub-account for the Special Public Works Fund for levees. There has been some work on identification of levees throughout the state. I would tell you that. Now, whether or not it's sort of housed under one building or one agency, I doubt it. But I do know that there has been work on identification of non-federalized levees throughout the state. We have over 1,000 miles of them, believe it or not, which is more than probably most people would imagine. But we should talk perhaps a little bit more because, as you probably know, I represent the big ones up in the Multnomah County area, and we've been working on this stuff since 2015. So there's some more information I could probably share and that they could share with where many of these levies exist, so on and so forth. It's a statewide issue, though, for sure.
Great. Yeah, Mark, we'll definitely follow up. All right. Any other questions, comments? This is the end of the list, so. All right. Oh, Kimberly, go ahead. Oh, other hands too. Okay, Kimberly and then JR.
Yeah, I guess I'm just curious if there are any conversations, with the agencies and the governor's office about, this is related to the grant programs. We're seeing an increase in, or at least from our view, it seems that there is an increase in direct appropriations. And I think, at least from WaterWatch's point of view, that money would be better put in the grant programs as opposed to direct appropriations. So I just am curious if there are discussions on how to weave that into the budget process, if at all.
Yeah, Kimberly, I know we have not, for this session, been looking at any policy solutions around that. I know we have had conversations with several legislators as well as the governor's office on kind of the increased burden that comes with direct appropriations from a staff management perspective. And so while we have not had any hard policy conversations around how to address those, we have been more upfront with legislators who are looking to find homes for direct appropriations about our agency's realistic capacity to actually manage direct appropriations as one-off appropriations. JR and then Kate.
Yeah, thanks. And I think this is something that we asked or kind of got to, but never really got clarity on. And it's just kind of another highlighted topic on the ODF&W reimbursement. So you currently reimburse ODF&W for their review of the applications, but the question I kind of have is usually what they do, at least what we experience, is they submit their comments and recommended conditions, and those get inserted directly into either our IR or PFO for these applications. And then if we protest that, or if a third party protests that, are you on the hook to pay for ODF&W's time through the protest process too, to engage in that if it's on their conditions that they've recommended, or is that something that they do on their own dime? And if you have any case examples, are you willing to share? Because I think the one thing that's the hidden cost is you've got your protest backlog budget, but then you have these other reimbursement. And one thing I just can't quite understand yet is, are you paying twice for engagement potentially if what they've recommended is ultimately protested?
That's a great question, JR. Katie, I might look to you. I know Dwight's out, so we might have to punt this. My understanding is that ODFW, we do not pay ODFW for their participation in protests. They have their own separate kind of costs that they have to manage related to protests. Is that correct, Katie?
We have to check on that. I think that's correct, but we have to verify, unless Lisa, you know more about that one.
I don't.
Okay, no problem.
Yeah.
But we, JR, as you know, for the water rights section, we have to make sure that applications are consistent with Division 33 requirements. So what we do is we evaluate the recommendations that our Division 33 partners provide, and then we make the decision about what to include as permit conditions. And so you're right, absolutely. An applicant, for example, could protest the conditions or requirements that we include based on Division 33. Somebody could also protest if they think that we haven't sufficiently included necessary conditions to meet Division 33. But yes, absolutely, just like any other standard, that can come into play in a protest.
Yeah, so JR, we'll confirm and we'll get back to you as to whether or not, I believe ODFW pays for their own participation because they have received funding in the past from the legislature to do that. So, all right, Kate.
Hi, Bryn, and I'm really sorry if I actually missed this in the conversation, but looking at the grant programs.
I can take this one. This is kind of about over.
Are you able to hear
Go
me?
ahead.
I think
Go
someone
ahead.
else was off mute.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, does this mean if you're really limited with funding and we're focused on the first group of things, I mean, what does this mean for recapitalizing those grant programs? That doesn't sound like a good optimistic picture.
Yeah, Kate, that's a great question. So it'll largely depend on what source of funding we pursue for each of the grant programs. So if you recall, water project grants and loans, that is largely lottery bond dollars. So the 1 to 2% cap is for general fund. So depending on which buckets of funding are being pursued, that cap may not apply. That is to say, though, you know, if we are going to pursue general fund for some of these programs, I think place-based planning is one that typically gets general fund. I think the feasibility studies is general fund as well. That is a calculation that we have to consider and think about. But I will remind folks that place-based planning, that has a rollover function within the program. So we did receive funds in 2023. We haven't spent those dollars, and so those funding will run over into the next biennium. So we'll be able to retain that $2 million that we got.
Thanks.
Yeah, great question, Kate. Oh, yes, I will stop sharing my screen. Thanks, Raquel. All right. Any other questions, comments? Kimberly.
Yeah, just to follow up on Kate's question and your response, I think it would be really helpful to have that kind of information in the chart. So when folks are prioritizing, we know which funds they're coming from, and or if money is going to be carrying over.
Okay. I think we can type that out and we can send that in some follow-up so folks can, because I will do some follow-up after on this, so I can include that information. Okay. Any other questions before I move on to next steps and wrap up? Okay. So, Raquel alluded to it earlier, but we are looking for folks to provide written feedback. If you have not provided feedback, if you would like to provide additional feedback than what you were able to provide today. And so again, as the reminder, we have a deadline for policy option packages of April 30th. And so what that means is we as an agency need to start refining this big long list as soon as possible. So I know we had initially asked for feedback by the 25th of April. We are going to request that you send your feedback to us as soon as possible and no later than Monday, the 22nd. It will be really important that we have all of your feedback in hand when we have to make decisions on which policy option packages are going to move forward in the ARB. So it's really important that you give us your feedback prior to that so we can consider it when we're doing our narrowing. So in terms of what type of feedback is helpful, Raquel alluded to it. We would like you to prioritize your top 5 items in the worksheet that we have provided. You don't need to rank them, but the more detail you can provide us, the more helpful that feedback will be. So even if it's, you only pick one and you say, throw all your money at this item, that's helpful. That's helpful information. Or I don't think this item is important. Or this seems like something that can wait until the next go around. That kind of feedback is always helpful. So we really want to make sure that we are able to have that feedback in hand. And so please, please, please get that to me ASAP or by close of business Monday, the 22nd. I will send this in writing to remind everybody, but that is kind of the new timeline that we are hoping to stick to. So that's how you can provide feedback on the policy option packages. I do want to transition. Are there any questions on providing feedback before I transition to next meetings and engagement opportunities on the calendar? Okay. So we have 2 more meetings currently on the books scheduled. The next meeting that we have is for April 30th. In this meeting, we've sent out some communication prior on this, but there was a desire expressed to have the discussion around opportunities for the water right transaction process improvement take place in a larger venue with more folks than what was initially occurring with the fee work group or the fee conversation. So we are making a space for that meeting on the 30th of April. Everyone is invited to show up to that. I will be sending out the agenda with the meeting invitation to this full group so folks can add that to your calendar. It is April 30th from 9 to 10:30 a.m. And so that is when that meeting will take place. Put it on your calendar if you're interested, and I will get an agenda out and also post it online for those who are interested in attending. That being said, there is a little prep that I encourage everybody to do in order to make this meeting as effective as possible. So we are going to be discussing ideas both that the agency has and ideas that folks have externally on how we can improve the water right transaction process from a policy perspective. So this can include anything from a small tweak up to a big overall process improvement. And so we are collecting ideas. We have a survey that we have created. We sent that out, but I'll send it out again, that we are hoping to collect ideas from folks ahead of the meeting and kind of be able to think about what implementation of some of these ideas might actually mean. You're more than welcome to bring your ideas to the meeting, but it is also helpful for us to have them a little bit ahead of time so we can kind of think on them. I'm dropping the survey into the chat. We are asking for people to fill that out by April 19th. So we have a couple impending deadlines. We acknowledge that this is a lot of work, but we're doing the best we can within the timelines that we've been given. So if you could fill out that survey, I will send out the link as well once I do some follow-up for this. But this is going to be kind of like the corral place for all of the process improvement ideas that we're collecting. And then we have another meeting scheduled for May 7th from 9:30 to 11:30, which is going to be our final public meeting, similar to how we ran this meeting today. So not exactly, I don't know if we have we don't have any agenda items set for that, but once we have that agenda and meeting materials, we will be sure to get that out to you all and also post it on our website. So that is all that we have today. I think we are still recording, so I will pause. This is all I have for everyone today. Are there any other final thoughts, questions, comments, anything that folks would like to add before we adjourn? Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Bryn. I'm just curious, do you see that survey as a broad survey to, maybe some members of ours that are interested in that? Or do you see that as more answering that as representatives of our organization?
Michael, I think whatever way is appropriate and makes sense for your group, you can decide. I will say that depending on what ideas we receive, you know, we may be asking folks to present their ideas. And so if someone's going to submit an idea and they don't intend to be at the meeting, we would highly recommend they appoint someone on their behalf to essentially be the champion for that idea. So just make sure that if ideas are being proposed, that there is someone there that has a good understanding of what the proposal actually is and can help explain the concept and ideas that they might have behind that idea.
Fair enough. Thanks.
Bryn, I think it would also be helpful to the extent that there are similar ideas within your membership that they get submitted by one person, only in the sense of I don't know that we have bandwidth to handle 1,000. If you're thinking of mailing it out to 1,000 cities, okay, there's 200 and something, right? So I'm exaggerating here, but there could be 1,000 folks that end up getting that survey. So I just want to be mindful of capacity. You know, I think Bryn's being generous here because I'm like, now I'm getting nervous in the sense of like,
Oh,
I
yeah,
don't have staff capacity to go through 1,000 survey responses. So
No,
so that's all I'm
why I
going to
asked.
say is, yeah,
I'm-
make
I'm-
sure that that folks have kind of refined down their ideas. I will say, and when I say refine down their ideas, at least synthesize them. I do think though that, you know, some of us, we may have, some of our ideas may be that like, hey, this process doesn't seem to be working. We might not have the solution yet. And that's okay too, to flag. I think protests, for example, is one area that keeps coming up in all of our conversations, right? In terms of the length of time it takes and the process. So that, for example, we may come to you all and say, we don't have the solution yet, but we think that we need to spend a lot of time talking about protests and how we can make this process work for everyone. So that's another example of how you could, you know, put forward information as well.
Yeah, thank you, Raquel. Thank you, Bryn.
Thanks, Michael. Mark.
Yeah, sorry. So I joined this meeting a little late, and I apologize. You know, there's always one of us in the group, and so I was just hoping to follow up. First of all, you want feedback on the POPs, and so it's your intention, Bryn, to actually send out this material and provide instructions, if I understood correctly, and you need that feedback. I think I heard that by the 22nd, no later than, but earlier is better.
Yep.
And then on the transaction side, are you going to send a separate email out with that survey that you linked in the chat, or is that is the link in the chat the only opportunity here? Just help me understand the second part, because it sounds like I got the first part right, which is pretty remarkable.
Mark, I'm going to send all of this information out at once, so you're not having to balance multiple emails from me. So we'll send out the instructions for providing feedback because it's changed a little bit. And then I'm also going to send out a link to the survey as well for the process improvement work. So that'll all be in one email.
Thank you so much. I apologize for making you repeat your instructions. I just want to be sure that I don't get a fail grade for not understanding the instructions. So thank you.
Yep, of course. Thanks, Mark. All right. I don't see any other comments or hands. So with that, this is all I have for you all today. I really appreciate everyone's time and continued engagement on this. We will be posting the recording on our website once we get it all downloaded and ready to post. So be on the lookout for that. If you have colleagues that you know maybe weren't able to make it, that might be interested in rewatching this meeting. And again, as I mentioned, I will be sending out some follow-up information for you all to provide feedback. So with that, thank you all again and have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.